Hello, everyone, and welcome to Community Conversations with the Y. This is one of many critical conversations that we are hosting to advance equity and justice locally and nationally for all. The Y staff and our Y Board of Directors have pledged to become an anti-racist organization. This commitment has never been more important as we emerge from 2020 and the dual pandemics that have devastated so many, especially our youth from BIPOC and underserved communities. The Y is here as a convener to engage community as thought partners and leaders, using our platforms and gifts to challenge the norms and bring lasting change. Our goal is to disrupt generational inequities that have been exacerbated over the last year. One critical disparity affecting many people in community is the drowning rate of youth of color. It's shocking to learn that Black children drown at a rate 5 times higher than white children aged 5 to 19. Black children ages 11 and 12 drown at a 10 times higher rate than their white counterpart. A recent study from the University of Memphis showed that 70% of African Americans do not know how to swim. These numbers are staggering, but not insurmountable. We're here today to discuss what can be done to address this issue to ensure that everyone can be safe around water. We will also explore what the community can do to make swimming and water safety accessible and equitable for all. I am so excited about this conversation today, as I am joined by one of the most amazing and inspiring people I have ever met, a community leader and a mother with a heart for children, community, and service. Our guest today has made it her life's work to create an equitable world where all children can dream freely about their future, regardless of their color. I am truly honored and humbled to introduce to you my friend, Michelle Hord. The Y could not ask for a better partner, Michelle, in you and Gabrielles Wings to help us in our efforts to eliminate drowning inequities that are disparately affecting Black children, and to help us ensure that all children can learn how to swim. So Michelle, with that, a hearty welcome to you. It's so great to see you.
Thank you, thank you. I don't know how I live up to all of that. I don't sing or dance or tap, but I'm gonna do my best here. Loria, the work you do and that the Y does is extraordinary. And it's why Gabriels Wings has been so honored to come in partnership with you to think about how we can really address this incredibly important issue in our community. Just to take a step back, I am first and foremost a mother. I am a mother of a murdered child. I lost my daughter Gabrielle when she was 7 years old. And Gabriels Wings, which is a nonprofit organization, was created to really look at those disparities and gaps where children that looked like my daughter did not always have access. My daughter was lucky enough, and I have on my little pin today, my daughter was blessed to be in a family where access to some of those things that we're talking about statistically were not a factor. Unfortunately, that's not the case for most of our children. So the work of Gabriels Wings is about standing in that gap for children of color in underrepresented communities. And, certainly a big place for that is when you talk about water safety, when you talk about exercise, when you talk about exposure and awareness overall. So I am just thrilled about our partnership.
And we are thrilled to be in partnership with you. And we feel your love, the love in your heart as a mother. And we're in awe of your keeping Gabrielle's memory in front of us and all the great things that she showed all of us during her life, and to bring it into this space of swim equity. So could you take a step back and tell us a little bit about your career? I hear the motherhood in you, but we know you are a really, kick butt career woman. So tell us a little bit about Michelle in terms of your career.
I feel now like my father is paying you, so I'm going to have to look into this scandal once we finish. So I've spent more than 3 decades, which I can't believe I'm saying now, in media, most in television network news. I have worked for places like Good Morning America, the Oprah Winfrey Show. At one point, I was responsible for all of the recruiting for NBC Universal. And so my career has been about communication and storytelling. And I even had the opportunity to share some of that with Gabrielle. Just a funny little aside, when she was about 2, I was working at Good Morning America and was able to get her on the show there for a segment. When she was 7, literally weeks before I lost her, unfortunately, she was part of an Easter segment at the Today Show. And she said very loud in hair and makeup, "Mommy, I was on Good Morning America when I was little. Now I'm on the Today Show. Which one is better?" And I said, "The one we're at is better." So just to give a glance, but certainly as a parent, you work hard, you want to succeed, to make an impact, but that imprint you want to make is on your child, especially that same-sex child, a girl, to be able to show the possibility of what you can do as a woman, as a Black woman. So those were the things that I was really tethered to as a mother.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit more about Gabrielle's Wings. I know the mission of the organization is bigger than swimming. Swimming is really important. We're going to get into that in just a moment. Could you talk more broadly about the mission of the organization and some other things that you've done around the globe through Gabrielle's Wings?
Absolutely. So at a very base level, the organization came from a place of passion of ensuring that my daughter's life and legacy were going to be about the work that was done in her name and not what happened to her. And in that sits a mother who, like so many of us, did everything she could to make sure her child had access to the best that she could give her, to things that I didn't have access to. And as a Black child, that meant access to things like swimming lessons very early on. I mean, she was in a swim diaper the first time we got in a pool. Access to art and education and culture. So what Gabrielle's Wings is really focused on at a global level is where are those, and unfortunately there are a lot of them, where are those gaps, where are those disparities from an equity standpoint, where access could be access to playgrounds that are accessible for children of all abilities. Access can look like a library collection that's focused on kindness and inclusion in a library where perhaps that didn't exist. Or access can look like updating a Girl Scout kitchen in a space where children not only learn about baking, but about science and math. So where are those places where we can partner with really strong partners to build hopefully scalable programming and opportunities that will allow children who looked like Gabrielle to bridge some of those gaps that she was blessed enough to have the opportunity to experience in her short life. So that's the work of Gabrielle's Wings. We are currently have a presence in a lot of different places. We give about $15,000 in college scholarships each year. We built a $250,000 playground that's accessible for children of all abilities in New York. We've also, as I mentioned, built a Girl Scout kitchen in New York, and we've started what we've called Gabrielle's Corner, which I really think will be the cornerstone of our work, which are resource centers, library centers in areas of need. And so 2 that I'm really proud of are in San Pedro, Belize, and in Cape Town, South Africa. And I can tell you that the center in Cape Town, South Africa, and this also speaks to how this work works across the board, even in the space of swimming, you're not just impacting the child, you're impacting the family, right? It is literally that drop in the water, the pebble, and how it ripples out. And so by creating access to Wi-Fi and iPads and computer information in Cape Town, that didn't just impact those children who were of a certain age. Their mothers who maybe were making bracelets had now a way to learn about e-commerce and how to get their work out. Their older children who perhaps were interested in college courses. So what work like this hopefully does at its best is not just give opportunity to a specific demographic, but really ripple out holistically to touch a family and a community in a significant way. So that's certainly what we try to do, and that's why we are thrilled to be partners with you.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing that. You know, we're in awe, I mean, given the global reach of Gabrielle's Wings, and for Seattle to be a part of this work, we are humbled to partner with you and to continue Gabrielle's legacy. So I want to go deeper now into swimming. You know, I remember when we first met and you shared your story, I saw the twinkle in your eye when you talked about Gabrielle in the pool, in the water. Mm-hmm. Can you share more about that?
Absolutely.
Could you share that with this group?
Absolutely. And I apologize for looking down. I'm trying to work on my Wi-Fi, you know, our modern issues. So I'm hoping you guys can hear me well and see me.
We can hear you great. You look great. Yeah, great, great all the way around.
So I was lucky enough. It really starts as a lot of things do generationally. Swim. They were afraid of the water. And so my mother insisted at a very young age that my brother and I learned how to swim. And of course, we learned how to swim with the Y. And minnows, guppies, I can't remember all the steps that you go through, but my love of water, my brother's love of water, and more important than love, confidence of one's ability to navigate in water. Were built through YMCA programs in the greater Detroit area growing up. So it was, I didn't even have to think about why it was important for Gabrielle to have those skills. And, you know, it's one of those things where, sure, maybe she would wind up loving it. Maybe she'd wind up doing something with it. But most importantly was safety. And her ability to be safe in the water, to respect what can happen in the water, and to know how to take care of herself in the water. And for me, that's no different than teaching your child to look left and right before they cross the street. You are providing them the groundwork to be safe.
Sure.
To be safe. So learning from, you know, ring around the rosy in the pool when I'm still holding on to her in her little pull-ups, was about comfort in water, was about safety in water. We know fear is really learned. And so by starting her early, it helped eliminate some of that. And it just so happened Gabrielle was a fantastic swimmer. Mm-hmm. So she had gotten to a point where her swim instructor had recommended that she become a part of a swim team in the area that actually trained junior Olympic and Olympic athletes. Wow. And one of my great joys was watching with her some of the members, you know, grown-up members of her swim club on television during the Olympics in 2016, the Summer Games. So, you know, on so many levels, from a safety standpoint, from an access standpoint, from a confidence standpoint, and then the power of seeing people that look like you who are doing things at the highest level. Yeah. You know, wonderful, wonderful experiences. And she loved the water. She loved the water. And so, you know, when you talk about the right age and the sweet spot where it becomes so important, where children start to have a little more independence and are maybe going to a lake with a friend or going to day camp, that's why this period of time that you guys have so smartly identified is crucial to us. That by the time you get to the third grade, and Gabrielle did not get to third grade, she was finishing second grade. But at that point, there is that pivot. And that's why the numbers start to change so dramatically. And that's why it's so important that we work on water safety for children in these communities in that early to mid elementary school age group.
Exactly. Yeah. So, the partnership between the Y and Gabrielle's Wings is the timing is just perfect because of our commitment and work that we will be launching soon. And we'll be launching this together, being really committed to all youth being able to swim by the time they exit third grade. And we recognize how critically important that is, especially for youth and families of color because of the statistics. And we're going to put up on the screen some of those statistics. I mentioned some of them in my introduction, but there are some other pieces around drowning being the leading cause of unintentional injury, death among children age 1 to 4, and one of the top 3 causes among persons aged under 29. It just emphasizes how important it is for all of us to make this a priority. And we talked about the research that showed that the participation in formal swim lessons can reduce the risk of drowning among children age 1 to 4 significantly. So this is just such an important area to invest for all kids. We mentioned the statistic about children 11 to 12 years old who drown at a 10 times higher rate than white children. So it's really important for us to double down in this space. So through our partnership, we're going to be working with youth and their families, African American, Black youth and their families, to be in the pool, to learn how to swim, and to have some family time. So can you share more about why the part of Gabrielle's strategy around water is so important now in view of what we're trying to do in Seattle?
Absolutely. So there's a few things. I think there's the why of Greater Seattle and why a program like this, given the work that we do. So I'll start with the programming, and we're very focused in what I call game changer opportunities. Where can we really fill the gap? We don't want our work to be transactional. There's a lot of great transactional work you can do. And we do some of that. We do give scholarships to college students, which in some instances could feel like a transactional thing. We're focused on giving those scholarships to students who perhaps would not be going to college without the money that they're receiving from us. So we look for those game changer inflection points in a child's life that will make the difference in their ability to have access, to dream, to function. Gabriel's Wings has a butterfly as our logo. Gabrielle loved butterflies, but the two powerful things beyond that is certainly the idea of a butterfly effect, that somehow just the simple flutter of a butterfly wing can just have ripple effects across the world, and the power of that, and the idea of soaring. And so that's what we look for in our opportunities with partners. So we look for strong partners who have subject matter expertise, who we can meet at an intersection and hopefully build, in my TV world, we would say pilot, programming and opportunities that can scale. We're looking for scalable opportunities. And so the Gabrielle's Corners that I mentioned in terms of library and technology are an example of something like that. And certainly a partnership with the YMCA of Greater Seattle is a partnership like that. And when I think of just the incredible diversity, whether it's socioeconomic, people of color that exist, your community is a microcosm of what makes this country amazing. And so the opportunity to partner with you, knowing that we could build something here together that could be scalable, that could be replicated in other Ys across the country. And the power in, certainly you are the gold standard when it comes to water safety and to swim lessons. So where we hoped to meet you was at the intersection of access, right? Is the lack of access about transportation? Is the lack of access about paying for swim lessons? Is the lack of access about having a swim instructor that looks like me? So how can we partner and take your platinum standard and meet you at that intersection to say, what can we offer to help amplify this incredible work you're already doing, but meet some of those gaps that perhaps are barriers of entry for communities and demographics where it's so important?
Yes. And a big focus of our work is right in that gap. You know, you mentioned a lot of those barriers, barriers to access, explaining why we have these disparate impacts in communities. I was having a conversation recently, and I was trying to help people understand why in some communities, it's just not intuitive as to these barriers. So for example, we talk about having access to pools and access to swim lessons, but some families are in a space where they're worried about where their next meal is coming from. They're worried about paying the rent for the month. And as a result, getting to that next stage, what they consider to be that next item around swimming is not the biggest priority. So some of it too is helping families meet their core needs so that they can, we can open the lens so they can see the criticality of swimming. So I'm just wondering, is that a space where Gabrielle's Wings is going deeper and seeing where those more basic needs of families are not being met? And is that why this family component is so important to this programming?
That's a great question. You know, certainly COVID has changed the lens for all of us, right? And I won't get it exactly right, but there's the old expression that if America catches a cold, Black America gets the flu. So think of that from a socioeconomic people of color standpoint and what's happened. You know, if America has a pandemic, what on earth are our children dealing with? Our children in communities who are disenfranchised, who don't have Wi-Fi, who don't have parents that can help them with at-home learning. So we, like many organizations, want to be agile and smart and pause over this last 18 months to say, how are we at our highest use? How has the need changed? How has the inflection point pivoted? And how can we meet it there? So certainly to your point, being inclusive, thinking of the 360 of a child's life. You know, I, as a 20-something, was involved with the Big Sisters program and had this amazing, brilliant young mentee. And I would, you know, take her out and took her to my beloved alma mater, Howard University, to see Black folks doing things and take her to the library. But you know what? I had to drop her back off in the most dangerous part of Southeast DC, surrounded by crack, surrounded in her house by people that said everything I was telling her was a lie, right? Not literally, but by what she saw. So that's where getting beyond the transactional and saying, how do you make generational changes?
Yes.
How do you make generational shifts? And, you know, there is that 1 in a million child that somehow figures out how to do it on their own without grandma or mama or a taxi. But the reality is most of us need that support. Most of us need that access. Most of us need to see that support and need to see someone or something that looks like us. So right now, Gabrielle's Wings is really focused on how do we, I don't want to say post-pandemic because I don't know that that's the most informed way to put where we are right now. But at this particular stage in this new evolving normal, how do we look at the greatest needs in the communities that were already facing gaps? And what can we do to build, not just triage, you know,
Right.
and it's hard, right? In this sort of work, we could have a whole conversation about how tough it is to be disciplined enough to not just put Band-Aids. but to think strategically, to think long-term, to set goals, to set metrics so that you can hopefully make systemic changes. Instead of putting a Band-Aid on today that helps today, but in 3 days it's going to fall off and you're going to be back where you were. So that, I hope I'm answering your question, but that philosophically is where we're trying to stand back, as hard as it is from a heart standpoint, because you want to help everyone where they are right now. And if we're talking about systemic change, it is about that child, but it's about everyone in that child's life. And it is about how that child will be empowered to know how to fish and not just get a fish.
Yes, yes. Now, you've definitely answered the question, especially the piece about, changing the narrative, breaking these, what I would dare say is a generational curse. And I myself have been part of that, having not learned to swim as a child, and actually just over the last 2.5 years, having learned how to swim. So these things are important, and to meet community where they are. We have such shared goals and values in this space, which is why it's so wonderful for the Y and Gabrielle's Wings to walk alongside of one another. I wonder if there's some things that we want to share with our listeners today about how community and others who want to join us in this work, how they can support this effort. Anything you'd like to share there?
I mean, I think there's several levels, right? There is the most obvious of how can you truly support. This work doesn't happen for free. And so from a donation standpoint, to help assist in the work is really powerful. I think looking for opportunities to mirror what we want these children to see, right? What do we want our children to see, and how are you involved? I think sometimes people get so overwhelmed by there's so much to do, there's so many issues, that they choose to do nothing instead of trying to do something. Yes. And so if that's in your church, if that's in Vacation Bible School, if that's in a Girl Scout troop, where are those opportunities where you can volunteer, where you can share knowledge? One of the most powerful things that I did not anticipate about Gabrielle's Wings was in each of the corners that we've started so far, we have a picture of Gabrielle. Mm-hmm. And that was important to me as a mommy. But you know what was really important too? Those children that look like her. Mm-hmm. Because typically people who come into their communities to help do not look like them. Mm-hmm. So just the message that philanthropy and giving back and service can come from someone who looks like you, who is empowered. Mm-hmm. To help. That a picture in a frame has done so much that I couldn't have even imagined. So I think sometimes we underestimate our individual contributions and what they mean. And you have so many kids, so many times where things are laughed off because people don't know what to do. It's like, oh, Black folks don't swim. Oh. And we've all heard, the different communities have these different sort of jokes, but the step back is that comes from a place of pain and lack. Mm-hmm. And so how do we create a bridge from that pain and lack to possibility? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's something we can do if we're teachers, if we're in the PTA, if we're in our sororities, if we're in our churches, if we're in our community civic organizations. Where are those opportunities to broaden the scope of the horizon to these children who see it in a much more narrow way than perhaps you see it or your children see it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I would just add, other ways for community, like you said, our kids can be it if they could see it. At the Y, we'd love to have more swim instructors of color, lifeguards of color, coaches of color, those volunteers you mentioned, and families just taking the first step to get their kids to the pool. Those are really important things. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it's about removing these barriers intentionally to enable access. So Michelle, our time has just flown by. I just want to give you the last word. I want to give you an opportunity to make any parting comments and share any call to action that you would have for our community of listeners.
Absolutely. I think, the idea of community conversation says it all right there. I hope over the last couple of years, the common denominators that we share have become so much clearer. We all think about sickness and health. We think about life and death. We need connection. We think about love. We think about equity. So if there's a silver lining to the double, triple, name it pandemic that we've faced in so many ways, it's hopefully that we see our communities in a broader way, that perhaps you saw your community as your synagogue, or you saw your community as your Black Baptist church, but now you see that community in a much broader way. And so I would ask that people hold themselves accountable beyond their backyards, beyond what's familiar, to realize in the same way vaccinating just a small group of people will not help us in a global way. Educating and giving access to a small group of us does not help us advance in a global way either. And we're not just a global economy, we're a global community. So that would be my challenge to the audience.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Michelle, we so appreciate your joining us today and for your big heart and your care for community. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us today for Community Conversations with the Y. We ask you to please join us again for other critical conversations to celebrate the rich fabric of our community, to learn together, and to advance equity and justice for all. Be well and be good to yourselves.